So hi, everyone, and welcome to our fourth Fusion Forum. I'm Martha Carter, the director of the Twisted Outreach Project for Back Care Scoliosis. We're a nonprofit and charity based in British Columbia, Canada. We're also known as TOPS. And our work is all about connecting people, patients, parents, practitioners, researchers, educators, people who can share real experiences and explore holistic approaches and build a sense of community around scoliosis and spinal fusion and the reality of living with it. Because a couple of things we know for sure is that meeting other people and learning from each other, learning from community really, really matters. And what else really matters is learning from each other how to move and live safely with this crazy condition of spinal fusion. There's always questions, no matter who you are and who you talk to. The big question is, who really knows? Who can we really talk to about these questions? What are the safe movements for life? What are the safe athletics in sports? What are the safe activities? What about yoga? What about everyday life, like lifting up groceries or doing household chores or handling a large child? So each of us know these questions, and we all have to find the delicate balance between what we must do, what we love doing, and also what our body will actually tolerate. And that's exactly why these fusion forums exist. We want to share lived experiences, the kind of experiences and knowledge that you don't usually find in medical journals. And we want to share stories from the heart, share strategies that we've explored ourselves. And we want to make these conversations public so that someone somewhere in the middle of the night searching for answers might be able to find us and feel like they're not so alone. Because despite the fact that millions of people worldwide are living with spinal fusion, there is still really very little practical advice or practical guidance on how to live with the fusions day to day, year to year, body to mind, mind to spirit. So over the past forums, we've explored three different chapters of the journey. The first one being surgery to adolescence, the second one being surgery later in life, and the third one was all about the complex reality of living with revision surgery. Today, we move into the new territory of pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing, and all with a fused spine, of course. So I have to admit that for me, it's been especially fascinating to listen to these stories as I didn't have children myself. And I sometimes wonder if my body actually made that decision for me. Like unconsciously, I knew that my fused spine and dealing with children would just maybe be a bit too much for me, and therefore it just never happened. So truly, I have enormous respect. Parenting is very physical. It demands strength, adaptability, and endurance in any body. And yet, what continues to amaze me is how people, even those of us with spinal fusions, continue to meet the challenge. I've watched many friends lift, carry, hoist children onto their hips, their arms growing stronger right alongside the children. And I've often thought, I just don't think I could do that. But then again, having listened to these stories, maybe I could have. And that's what today's about, the possibilities, how to adapt, how to live these experiences. So we're really fortunate to hear from three wonderful women, Kathy Heath, Stacey Joyce, and Megan Quitoni, who will all share their journeys of navigating motherhood with a fused spine. And their stories reveal not only the physical realities, but also the subtle, often unspoken ways that fusion can shape our lives, sometimes in ways we don't really understand until years later, like while we were preparing for this talk. But before we begin, I just want to do a gentle reminder that every spine is different, every fusion is different, every life is different. Access to care varies, choices around pregnancy and childbirth vary. What feels right and what is possible for each person will always be deeply personal. Without further ado, let's begin. And I'm going to introduce you to the lovely Kathy Heath, who is going to share with us her journey as a mother. So thanks so much for being here today, Kathy, and take her away.
Thank you so much, Martha. Hello, my name is Kathy. I'm 60 years old and I live in Vancouver, BC with my 25-year-old daughter and my 25-year-old son, 24-year-old son, pardon me. I have right a thoracic lumbar scoliosis and a Harrington fusion from T5 to L3. My scoliosis was diagnosed when I was 12 years old through routine Adams test screening in a grade 6 swim class. The examiners had the children bend over and roll back up, and they looked for any asymmetries in our backs. I remember being the only one who was identified as having any asymmetries, and I was referred to a surgeon who told us there were two options. The first was to wear a brace for about 5 years until progression, until I was done growing. The other was to have experimental pacemaker surgery. I remember thinking wearing a brace will be too embarrassing. Um, so we decided on the surgery. I was 13 years old, and they implanted a device in my right lower back, which had three wire leads attached to the muscles on the right side of my spine. The device was controlled externally and used at night to contract these muscles against the right side of my spine at regular intervals. It was quite painful, very difficult sleeping, and very embarrassing at summer camp. I was like this bunny hopping in my bed at night. But I used it as prescribed for several years until they deemed it hadn't worked. It hadn't stopped the curve from progressing. In fact, the curve doubled over that time. They told me to stop using it, but they told me they wouldn't take it out until I was done growing, and I would have to have spinal fusion surgery. So I'd always been sporty as a child. I continued to walk, bike ride, play field sports, do gymnastics throughout high school, even with this pacemaker implanted. The doctors continued to monitor my right wrist bone and determined at 17 I was done growing. My mother had moved away by this time, and I remember independently and all alone visiting the surgeon and being told it was time to do the Harrington fusion surgery. I have this recollection of him listing off all the possible problems from surgery, including becoming a quadriplegic potentially. And despite that image, and despite not being in any pain at all, actually, I just agreed to the surgery. I'm not sure if it was a rebellious thing or just that I wanted the pacemaker out so badly or just that I was kind of told or brainwashed into knowing I needed to do this at some point for future wellness, so I should just get it out of the way. So I agreed to it. It was 1984. I was in grade 12, living with my 18-year-old sister, and I planned the surgery for Christmas, thinking I would have the holiday break to recover and I could get back to school in January. I was a big keener student. The surgery took about 4 hours. I was in the hospital for about a week. I recall being in a lot of pain and needing help just to roll from side to side. And I couldn't sleep on my stomach anymore. I had to learn to sleep on my back or my side. Before I left the hospital, I was fitted with a plastic and polyester brace that I had to wear 24/7, and it was kept snug with these Velcro straps. I wore the brace for about a year, and to carry anything, I had my sister or my friends who helped me. It was tough. I mean, I don't even really recall, but I just kind of plowed through it. I was cautious and I healed well. I, like to follow doctor's orders. So after that 1 year of doing nothing, besides probably just walking to school and back, I resumed an altered form of activity. What I mean is, I couldn't do any back bending or rotating activities, but I could do virtually everything else I had done before. Um, so that's what I did. I kept biking, I kept playing sports. But if I reflect back on that time, I realized how my body learned how to accommodate. I had always had these really flexible legs. Um, and so even up until today, I can still do the splits. My lower body has flexibility. Perhaps my body compensated because my upper body didn't have any flexibility. And I've also learned to accommodate my fused spine. So even when I'm brushing my teeth, I always have to use an elbow on the sink. And anytime I have to lean or bend over, I'd always learn to accommodate my spine. Um, so that was, just thinking back on those times, that's sort of how I managed through. And, I was active in university, even with the fused spine. I biked to school every day. I played baseball, flag football, lots of field hockey. So even bending over, it wasn't a problem. When I graduated university, I went to work in a lab. I was on my feet all day, which was great. It was definitely more comfortable than sitting. And after work, I went to high impact aerobics every day. No problem. I never had any plan for kids. It had nothing to do with my scoliosis. It was more just my worldview being quite pessimistic. And, I had, not a great childhood. So it wasn't something that I had ever considered. But at 33, my body took over. I had an irrational need to make babies. I got pregnant very easily with both kids. I didn't have any morning sickness with either child. I did have some significant food odor allergies that even to this day lingers. I can't stand the smell of coffee, funnily enough. I remember sleeping became a little bit difficult later in the pregnancies. I don't know if it was any worse than anyone else without a fused spine. I had the pillows for bumpers, and I don't remember it being a huge problem. We went to all the pregnancy classes. We had a birth plan. It didn't involve any meds, but I did have a consult with an anesthetist anyways. It was apparent, my doctor considered it required because of my fusion and my scoliosis. They wanted to make sure they had access for epidural or a spinal tap, just in case either of them were needed. My first child, a daughter, was a week late. And when my labor finally started, um, it started slowly. We were at home, things were going well, but after about 12 hours, the contractions were still far apart. So it was like, all right, let's go to the hospital. I don't know that the doctors told me to do that. It was just sort of something I felt I needed to do. But that's when things got hectic. Whenever I had a contraction, I'm sucking on this, pain gas, and then they wanted to hook me up for an IV for some oxytocin to increase the contractions. And I remember that IV in my hand was just the most painful, uncomfortable things. And it was almost one of the worst parts of the whole birthing process. It was really all I could focus on. And then the baby was in some stress. They were monitoring her heart rate and it kept decelerating. And um, they figured she was wrapped around the cord. So after 30 hours of labor, 6 hours of it on my back with all these beeping machines and wires and IV, my daughter was delivered by cesarean section, healthy and happy. There was no problem freezing me from the chest down for the cesarean. As I recall, I healed well. I was able to pick up the baby and carry her in a baby Bjorn and a sling until she became too heavy. But again, thinking back, I was probably doing all my accommodating things to enable myself. I was able to breastfeed, and care generally went quite well. I got pregnant very easily with my son, just 6 months after my daughter was born. I had planned a VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean. I was really wanting to have that natural birth experience. I got a midwife and a doula, and was all ready to prepare for this natural birth. And then around 20 weeks, I was told I have placenta previa, which is where the placenta covers the cervix. So you can't deliver vaginally that way. In addition, it's a very high risk for bleeding. And so they put me on bed rest for the last semester. And so I was a lot less active, a lot less fit in my second pregnancy. Um, and you know, I remember not really enjoying the pregnancy experience at all. Some women talk about how wonderful it was. I mean, it wasn't that hard, but especially the second pregnancy, I remember just wanting to get that child out of me. It felt like an alien body, like, I just couldn't wait to get that child out of me. Love you, son. Um, my son was delivered 5 weeks early by cesarean. It was planned that it was going to be a cesarean. It just wasn't a planned date. So he was delivered actually, it was after a pretty big Swiss chalet dinner, as I recall, and there was a bleeding incident. And I went to the hospital late one night, and I remember being given the option of, we could deliver the baby tonight, or we could, you're here, you're safe, we could deliver it in the morning. And I remember thinking, oh, my husband has to go to work in the morning. Let's just do it tonight. I remember the resident saying, oopsie, when he made the first cut. Can you imagine? Oopsie. Hearing that at that point. It turns out that he cut and damaged nerves to my abdominal muscles, which has greatly affected me even to this day. First of all, my ego, because I had this beautiful six pack, which was gone. More importantly, when he did that cut, he lost me my core strength, which was protecting my back all those years. So, thinking back on this, I was never given any support to rehab my cesarean, whether scoliosis specific or not. I wasn't given any, support for this nerve damage. And I just had to figure it out all on my own. And, I really hope something better is available for people these days. But two babies on me, I sort of resumed normal activities, went back to the gym, did weight training, jogged, biked, I skied, I did it all. I mean, I skied on the greens and the blues because I was still very cautious, didn't want to fall with my fusion. Um, Both of my kids were in full-time daycare when I went back to work after 1 year. I was in pharmaceutical sales, and I had a varied schedule. I had a home office, but didn't have to sit in one place for very long. I was driving, I was visiting customers, I did some desk work, so it was all quite varied. I wasn't doing a lot of childcare during the day, picking up, taking here and there, because they had the daycare. And I got to say, daycare was just a gift for sure. Work got busier. I traveled a lot throughout the province, meetings to Montreal. I was away from home a lot. I was sitting more, working out less. My weight started creeping up. I started dabbling in yoga, and then I injured my hip at a yoga retreat at 40. It became clear that my compensating and accommodating strategies weren't working any longer. I had extreme back pain at about 45 years old. That sent me to a local orthopedic surgeon, and I begged to have these rods out. I just figured you could just pluck them out, not even really realizing that they're fused in me, I have to say, 45 years old. He told me, no, it's not possible. Just learn to live with it. And he gave me no direction, no physio, no, referral to anyone specific. Um, I just, was sort of left on my own to deal with my pain. I saw various body practitioners over the years. I oscillated between being able to function and not. None of them were specialized in scoliosis. I started playing field hockey again at 50 years old, lost a bunch of weight, got very fit. And it was fantastic for about 5 years. Great camaraderie, fun, fitness. I played through a lot of lower back, hip, and hamstring pain. I was taped up galore. Definitely was the oldest girl on my team. Then COVID hit. I had no regular fitness routine. My body stiffened up, and I snapped the meniscus in my right knee running for a train one day. It was a real setback for my body. I wasn't doing much beyond walking for almost a year. I began seeing a heavy handed osteopathic manual therapist who helped me heal my knee and improved my movement and my alignment. But we parted ways when she gave me a brand new, unexplained clicking and popping sensation and sound in my lower back. It isn't painful, but it just made me fear for broken rods or some other fusion related problem. Did some x ray investigations, which showed me that my hardware is intact, but it also revealed how deteriorated my spine, my vertebrae, all these big words that, just terrifying. Um, my doctor was kind of looking at me confused, thinking I should be in so much pain, and I'm actually really not. I said, but it really made me worry about how fragile I was, and I kind of, I was really lost and worried for a few years, and then a family friend referred me to the Twisted Outreach Project, and I have to say, after a few retreats using somatics, Iyengar yoga, and other scolio specific work, Scoli Coach, I'm finally, for what feels like the first time in my life, connecting with my body, my back, my scoliosis, breathing into my convexities, using massage balls, yoga asanas. They've all helped me to have more control over my nervous system. I'm able to make adjustments to alleviate pain. I'm able to walk stronger and more freely as I strengthen and unstick my hips and rehab my core. It's an ongoing battle. I still have setbacks. I still get laid up, here and there, when I push myself beyond my limits. But I just feel so much better equipped now to carry on the journey. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Kathy. It's
You're
so
welcome.
interesting to hear how athletic you've been able to be, and I know you, so I know how vibrant your energy is. Yet at the same time, it doesn't mean that you haven't gone through the challenges like so many of us do. So thanks so much for sharing that
You're
journey
welcome.
in general, and also the details about what you went through for becoming a mother. So
Thank
thanks so
you.
much for that. For now, we'll just move on to our second speaker of the day, hearing a little bit more about motherhood with spinal fusion. So here we have Stacy Joyce is with us, and Stacy has her own amazing journey of her own. So thanks so much for being here to share, Stacy, and take it away.
Thank you, Martha. So yes, my name is Stacy Joyce. I live in the Charlotte metro area, North Carolina, with my husband and my 12-year-old son. I'm 47 years old. I had my spinal fusion when I was 16 in 1994, and my fusion is from T5 to L3. And I actually shared my sort of general story in the first fusion forum, if you ever want to look back at that. My child, my one son, I only had one, was born when I was 35 years old. So a little bit of background on me. I was not athletic growing up. I did a little bit of sports in middle school, but by the time freshman year hit and I discovered my scoliosis, I was in constant pain until I had my surgery. I was not doing anything active. I wish I knew that there were things to do to alleviate some of the pain, but I didn't know of anything at the time. So for me, after my fusion, it wasn't a matter of getting back to a sport because I wasn't doing anything. I did start practicing yoga 2 years after my spinal fusion because it felt safe, and I think that helped me reconnect to my body and serve as sort of like a gateway to doing other things to eventually feel like, yeah, I can be athletic and I can do all these fun things. I also did not grow up wanting kids. I didn't babysit. I just didn't really think that that was going to be part of my future. After college, actually wanted to live in Spain. I couldn't get a job in Spain. So I joined the Peace Corps. I lived in Honduras for 2 years. When I came back from Honduras, I moved to New York City. Definitely not a place that is going to pressure you to settle down. Shortly after moving there, I met my now husband. He didn't want kids. So for years, was just living the life, traveling, having fun. And somewhere around 30, I was starting to change my mind. And I knew I wanted a child. I think I always felt like it was just going to be one. And there's never a consideration about my back. I don't think my surgeon ever said anything about pregnancy. And I never thought that I needed to consult a doctor about it or ask permission, and I wasn't nervous about it. And during this time when I was living in New York City, I was working in office jobs, and physically that was hard. So all these years when I was traveling and living in Central America and backpacking through Nicaragua, all those things were fine for my back, but to be stuck in one spot all day was really hard on my back. And the years would be different. I would have years where it would be like my shoulders, it would just feel like there was these constant knots, and then it would be low back. And I would have times where I would leave the office and look up like where's the local place so I can get a massage, because I thought if I go back to my apartment and get in the tub, I might not be able to get out. So I got to a certain point where I knew I had to make a change. I knew I couldn't stay in an office job. And that's when I quit and I went into a full-time month-long yoga teacher training. It was like a job Monday through Friday. And I didn't even actually know if I would teach. I just had to do something different. And after that 200-hour, I immediately went into the 300-hour training, and I decided to focus on my project for the group was to share about yoga for scoliosis. And it was too much to even consider the spinal fusion on top of that. So it was really just focusing on what it meant to practice yoga with scoliosis. So I sought out some specialized teachers in New York City at the time, and it completely changed my practice. I realized that in 15 years of practicing yoga, that not a single teacher had understood what it meant to have scoliosis, much less a spinal fusion. I was doing so many things that were just contraindicated for the scoliosis, for the spinal fusion, and I wasn't doing things that were going to take care of my back for the long term. So I was very upset, but then I decided, well, I'm going to be the back care teacher. I'm going to work with people who don't have typical spines. And it was during this time I met the first person I met Mimi Rossetti. She was the first person I ever met who had scoliosis, spinal fusion, and she also was pregnant. She may have even been like third trimester. And here she is, like very pregnant, teaching yoga, very vibrant, energetic, living in the city. And I think that really planted a seed that, oh, like she's doing it. She was around my age. I was like, that can be me too. And so around shortly after I met her, I moved out of New York City. I moved to New Jersey, and with a month of leaving the city, I got pregnant. I think the shift of my nervous system, not being around all that hustle and bustle and noise in the city, just allowed me to get pregnant immediately. At one point, I went back into the city. I had a private yoga session with Deborah Walk. She also worked with Mimi Rossetti. And without even asking me my birth plan, she said, you can have a natural childbirth. Don't let them tell you that you can't. And I just remember thinking, well, that's what I want, but it was just nice to have that kind of support and encouragement and not people telling me to be fearful. So, um, my generally like my pregnancy was a great experience. My normal kind of end of the day, achy back, things like that. I had none of that. No back pain. I didn't have morning sickness. I didn't have food aversions. I was tired in the first and third trimester, which is typical, but that was the only thing that was like the most challenging, is needing the extra sleep. The first physical change I felt was my rib cage. So yeah, most of my spine is fused, but my ribs are not. They can still rotate, they can still expand, and none of my bras, none of my sports bras fit anymore. And even after my pregnancy, it wasn't a matter of weight, but like all those things never fit, zip up dresses. I just had to give all of those away. Like my rib cage just forever changed. And that's to be expected is the hormonal changes in adolescence and puberty and then pregnancy and then menopause are times when many women see changes, more dramatic changes in their scoliosis. Um, Throughout my pregnancy, my main exercise was walking. I lived near a park, so I was almost out there every day. I was teaching yoga. So I think that helped that I wasn't bound to like one spot, being at a desk. I think that was very important for me. I decided to work with a birth doula, and I think it's just the fact that I'd moved to a new state. I didn't have friends there. I just felt like I needed support. And I called a few, just kind of like interview process, like I don't know which one I want to work with. And I remember it being such a helpful experience because these women were so experienced with all the doctors in the area, with all the hospitals, and they were just giving me the lowdown and all these tips. And one thing that I learned at that time, it was 2012, was that New Jersey had the highest cesarean rate in the country. It was 39%. And immediately, without overthinking it, I just thought, I had an anterior fusion. A week later, I had a posterior fusion. So I have two very long scars from my spinal fusion surgery. And I thought, I do not want a third. And so for me, I just right away figured I want a natural birth. I don't want any planned interventions that I don't need because I was worried if I took the epidural that it might lead to another intervention, to another, and maybe to a cesarean. So I chose to work with a birth doula who was also a yoga teacher, and she was also a hypnobirthing coach. And the hypnobirthing, it's a practice of like helping you just have like a really good experience in your pregnancy and your birth. It's a lot around mindset, self-hypnosis, positive affirmations. There's some education involved in there too. I just don't remember that part so well. The nice thing is that we were the only couple who signed up for a weeknight class. And so the instructor came to our house. It was for both of us. We really liked her. It was enjoyable. And that was really my focus in my pregnancy is I didn't go to any of the classes at the hospital to learn about any topics, to learn about breastfeeding, to learn about how babies sleep, none of that. I would just spend time with my hypnobirthing CDs. I would listen to my meditations, my visualizations, and just focusing on just keeping that like positive mindset and trusting my body. And I really think that the trust in my body came from the experience of studying the effects of yoga for scoliosis in my yoga teacher training, because although it felt like it was shattering my world and I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm learning all these things that I shouldn't be doing or that I'm not going to be teaching. When I learned that information, it started to help me feel empowered and that like now I was really investing in my future. So I think that the mindset piece was in the body confidence is something that was very important for me and luckily came prior to being pregnant. It was just nice how everything kind of worked out that way. I had my birth plan. I had my diagram that copies I was going to give to every nurse. I had my music playlist. I rented a birthing tub. I would have gone to a birthing center if one existed in New Jersey, but there wasn't one in my area. So I was all about a natural birth. And I did not want an epidural. And I wasn't worried about the pain because to be in constant pain before going through back surgery, I was in the hospital for 3 weeks with my spinal fusions, and then I wore a brace afterward. I mean, I remember not even wanting to watch movies in the hospital, just wanting to stare at the ceiling and press my morphine button. So I just thought, I went through so much extreme pain with that surgery. I was like, I think I can handle the temporary discomfort of giving birth, and just kind of knowing for generations this is what women have been doing, and just kind of having that faith that everything was going to work out. So 2 weeks before my expected due date, my water broke. I thought, this is weird. Usually they think that first-time mothers are going to be past the due date. And so I called my doctor's office and they said to come on in. And I said, well, I'm in a CPR training. I'll do it later. And I went in later and they said, yes, your water broke. You should be going to the hospital. And so I didn't, well, not right away, because I didn't have any contractions. So I went home. My husband and I went out to the park. We were walking. I was just trying to like move, do whatever I could think of to help bring on contractions, some signs of labor. But at a certain point, it was getting late. And so we started driving to the hospital, at which time, like, the doctor's office called and asked where I was, because already the doctors had switched shifts and they were expecting me and I hadn't shown up. And so when I arrived, my doula went to the hospital as well. There was a different doctor, not the, one that I had hoped would be ready. But, again, it was coming back to the mindset. I felt like I trusted in myself and it was going to work out. So the fact that my water had broke earlier that day, they didn't want to just like let me just be overnight. And so the doctor gave me Cervidil. So it's a drug that they insert to kind of like ripen the cervix to speed things along. And the doctor said, this probably will do nothing. We'll probably have to repeat it tomorrow after 12 hours. He went home, the doula went home. They thought nothing was going to happen. And not too long later, I mean, maybe a couple hours, a nurse came in to check and she was like, oh my gosh, you are about to give birth. And I just remember all of a sudden, I look and the room is filled with almost every single nurse on the floor. This is not the kind of scene that I want. I'm in such a compromised position. And I remember feeling really uncomfortable about that. And so I told myself, I'm like, Stacey, just shut your eyes and don't think about them. And so that's what I did, is I shut my eyes and I didn't open them again. I just ignored the fact that these people were in the room. And it was an intense experience giving birth, but I didn't have an epidural. There was no other interventions. Had the vaginal birth. My son was healthy. He was nursing right away. I think the doctor came in at like the very last moment, but the doctors don't really do anything. It's the woman who's doing everything. Like, I don't like saying like he delivered my baby. He didn't deliver my baby. I'm the one who delivered my baby. My birth doula, she came in like probably the next day because it was in the middle of the night. But I still think that it was an excellent choice to work with her through that experience. When I got home from the hospital, I just remember everything physically changed. Like, that's when I started feeling back pain again. Even when my son was really small, just this like different leaning to try to bathe him in the tub. It's like I was using different muscles. I remember thinking, how am I going to do this? Because it just felt really hard. It's very physical. And I was also nursing, just goodbye sleep for so long, just like up all night. I kind of regret it not spending more time when I was pregnant learning about how to take care of a baby. I just thought intuitively I would just know. So I could have done a little bit better there, balancing my free time when I was pregnant on that part. Um, but my doula was helpful at the beginning because she saw me nursing my son and she told me, she said, your posture is horrible. I was, like slouching, rounding my shoulders, and I realized I need a lot more posture awareness. I need to like build it up, bringing him to me. And I started daily exercises for my shoulders to not be rounding them, just stretches to open my chest. And around that time, I also started developing hip pain, which I've never had before. And I realized why I was having hip pain is because I would sit on the edge of the bed while I was nursing my son. And nursing's not a quick thing. It's like you just feel like a piece of furniture sometimes. And I would just let one leg dangle off the side of the bed. And I just realized I'm like, that's why my hips in pain. I need to use my body in a symmetrical way. I need to sit on both sides of my pelvis. So I think having the body awareness from my yoga practice and just incorporating some little things into my everyday routines was very helpful. But as my son was getting bigger and older, like it was harder. So some of the baby wearing, like the slings, I couldn't use the sling after maybe 2 months. Well, one of the slings where it was like a side sling because it wasn't a symmetrical load. And there was some kind of baby wearing devices where it has a lot of hip support. They're very central to you. And I remember going through a few, trying to figure out which one was best. But whenever I would go to, say, like the grocery store, I never took the car seat out of the car. I would see women like taking the car seat out or walking in. I never did that. I would always take my son out of the car seat, put him in the carrier, like right next to my body as close as possible. And that's how I would carry him up until he was a toddler. And I think like that helped my back a lot. When I got to the point of my son being around a year and a half, I decided that I needed to get stronger. Although the walking and the yoga was completely enough when I was pregnant, I felt like the carrying the child, the diaper bag, when you're nursing, you're always drinking water, you're always eating. It was just, you're always carrying stuff. It was just a lot of work. And I felt like I really needed to get stronger. So when he was about a year and a half, I joined a gym and I waited because I needed him to be old enough and comfortable enough with using the child care at the gym. He'd never been in daycare, so that was a long transition, but that was helpful for me of just building like more strength, physical strength. And at the time, I went back to teaching, like very part-time. Initially it was a lot of like prenatal yoga here or there. It was very fresh in my mind. And by the way, if anybody is familiar with back care yoga, it's very similar to prenatal yoga. You're not doing deep twists and back bends and big folds, things like that. So I remember when I did do prenatal yoga, which I did online when I was pregnant, I was just kind of like, oh, I've got this. Like, this sounds familiar. But I like the prenatal classes because they talk about your baby and this and that. And it was just like a nice touch. So I did enjoy prenatal yoga, which I did online. As my son got older, I was thinking for a very short minute of having a second. And then I just realized I'm like, no, I think it's that everybody around me is having more babies. That's not actually what I want because as my son got a little bit bigger and out of babyhood, I felt like life was getting a little bit easier as he was getting more independent, not needing to be picked up all the time, things like that. It was easier on my body. And I really felt like I had a good pregnancy, I had a healthy son, my body's good. And I felt like I don't want to rock this boat. I was like, I'm just going to keep things as they are. So, yeah, for, very short period, I was kind of thinking like maybe to do a second one, but also I got pregnant at 34. I had my son at 35. And I know people have kids at all different ages, but that kind of felt like that was my period that had passed. So a couple years went by and I kind of stopped teaching because I didn't have a tolerance for just teaching general classes anymore or flow or things like that. And then eventually a friend of mine, Allison Sorokin, opened a studio and she said, I want you to teach whatever you want. And that's when I decided to get back serious about my practice. And I said, if I get back to teaching, I am only teaching like back care, scoliosis, spinal fusion. And that's when I went back to Elise Browning Miller and I did her certification. And I just focus on teaching that type of classes because I think that there's so much to gain from the yoga practice, but there's so much that can be contraindicated for certain back conditions. And then recently, the last couple of years, I was introduced to Scoliopilates. I finished my Scoliopilates certification last year. And that's also helped me in new ways in building strength that I didn't have before. So now I'm able to drive more than 45 minutes because that used to be my limit and not experience back pain. And this is pretty new for me. So it's exciting that I can drive myself places where I used to really avoid road trips. So it's also just to say that as we go through different phases of our life, like I mentioned in pregnancy, just walking and yoga were fine. But at a certain point when our body changes, it's like, well, you might need something new into the mix and change it up. And so that's what I've found like helps for me is sometimes just changing that balance. Yeah, I guess I just want to finish and just sharing a couple like things I would say if I were to look back. um, in that I would be in the mindset of like, don't think that things are have to be perfect in being in the wait until later. So I just felt like being pregnant, raising a child is just such an insane amount of energy. And I really wasn't prepared for it, although I felt like, oh, I'm healthy and all these things. And I just couldn't help but constantly wondering, like, how would this be if I were a little bit younger, if I were a few years younger? And certainly we can't go back in time, but I would just say, all the little things will like figure themselves out. I would try to do it on the earlier side than later. And then also, I think it really helped to prioritize movement and stress. Um, I know not everybody can just leave an office job, but finding as many opportunities to switch up positioning and so forth, I think is really important for us. Too much standing isn't good and too much sitting isn't good. And then we need some movement in there as well. And then the other is to talk to doulas or midwives, even if you don't plan to hire them. I think what I learned from just having these short conversations was so helpful just to learn the reputation because I was also new in a new state. That was helpful to, I switched obstetricians mid-pregnancy. I went with one that had a great reputation. He was associated with a different hospital, had better lower cesarean rates, for example. Like I never would have known these things on my own. And then lastly, and this one's probably the trickiest, is like to figure out what are your desires without being swayed by other people's fear or people instilling fear in you and just kind of like sticking to your guns. So like I said, I had lots of plans with like my pool and my playlist and things like that, and they didn't necessarily work out. Maybe none of those things work out, but it's like we can still try, there's still the chance for that. So I think that it helped me to kind of figure out what it was that I had. And for me, it did work out to be pretty tunnel vision in that regard. So I think that's all that I wanted to share. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Once again, another engaging story. So many things to take care of, just in general, with planning to be a mother, but then adding on the spinal fusion story and all the considerations around that. I know that you've really put a lot of time into that, and you have so much to share moving forward as well in your teaching. So it's fantastic that you're part of this talk today, but also that you're such a strong force in the movement community for scoliosis and fusion now. And I'm so grateful for that. So thank you. And we'll have one more beautiful story with Megan Quitoni here. So here's Megan, and thank you for being here. And take it away, Megan.
Hi, I am Megan and I am 48 years old. I am also fused T5 to L3. I was fused at 13. I never wore a brace pre-surgery or post. I definitely should have. I was the middle school time period. We were doing the Adams test in gym. I was diagnosed by the nurse. She kept sending home a note. She has scoliosis. We kept going to the doctor. Doctor was like, no, she doesn't. She's fine. So definitely there was a window of time where I probably should have been braced, but we just sort of ignored it. And then I hit a growth spurt. Things kind of went rapidly changing. And then I went right to having surgery. So I went to Boston's Children's Hospital. I grew up in New Jersey, but we went to Boston's Children's Hospital for the surgery. And I swam as a kid and did some, soccer and some other things here and there, gymnastics, but no sports really stuck. And I definitely didn't do much in high school after my fusion for many reasons, probably mostly out of fear. So I'm fused from T5 to L3, L4, and L5 were unfused. That was a deliberate move in order to keep me with the most mobility for the long term. So I basically lived pain-free until I had kids. Motherhood sort of shook it all. And I have two kids. I have one who is 9 and one who is 7, a boy and a girl. I was late to the pregnancy party. I definitely am the elder, most geriatric pregnancy of the group here. I had my kids at 39 and 41. So I definitely echo the sentiment that starting younger is definitely in your best interest if you can. Perimenopause and childbirth, not a great combination for so many reasons. But so yeah, I pretty much healed up well from my second pregnancy. All my kids are IVF. I had 3 miscarriages prior to getting successfully pregnant, which was done through IVF. So both are frozen embryo transfers. So thank you, modern science. Seems to be saving me in a lot of ways, I guess. So I did develop bursitis at the top of my fusion during pregnancy with my first. I believe it was just like the change in, sort of your center of gravity and just weight distribution. So the muscles at the top of my fusion just got super inflamed and that got really painful, reaching forward and things like that. I still get a flare up there every now and then, but definitely otherwise my back held up great. I didn't really have much pain. I also had huge plans for like a supernatural pregnancy and everything was going to be like, I don't know, like puppy dogs and rainbows. None of that happened. So just like my advice there is go in with the best intentions, but be ready for literally anything. So don't be surprised when it all just sort of falls to the wayside. I ended up having a planned C-section with my first. I joked that he did not want to leave the womb. I carried him for 41 weeks. And finally, my doctor was like, he's got to leave. He's giant. And you can't keep going. And I was like, no, but I want it to be natural. And he's just going to leave on his own. I tried all the spicy food, the acupuncture. I did it all up and down the steps. And he just was like not budging. So went in for the planned C-section. And I'll just take one quick step back to the epidural conversation. So I did a spinal block instead of an epidural. There was a lot of conversations going into it about whether or not the epidural would successfully numb both sides and be equal due to the fusion. I remember going in and seeing an anesthesiologist with my X-rays, and I brought my X-rays with me at the time of the C-section as well. And they were, consulted throughout. I would say the biggest thing for me with my first pregnancy was all of the trauma that was brought up. I joke, or not joke, I just sort of say that my 13-year-old self was in that operating room with me 100%. I've never been so scared in my life. I like just the administering of the spinal. I can recall like a PA and a nurse like holding my hands because my whole body was shaking and I was like, what's happening? I couldn't see what was happening behind me, and they were putting the needle in through into the spine, and that just like shook me to the core. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? It's my back, my spine. That's honestly, I wasn't even focused on the pregnancy. I was so focused on my back and worried that something was going to happen. I don't think I felt relieved through the surgery until the numbing went away and I could move my feet again. And that was like the point that I could relax. I was like, okay, I can still move all my like lower extremities. Like it's okay. And so it was a little bit traumatic, the first pregnancy, the first delivery, I would say. It was definitely my son also had the cord wrapped around his neck. There was some drama in the actual delivery room as well, but we all survived. Everyone's great, everyone's healthy, thank goodness. But then we proceeded to the motherhood part. um, that was hard. The nursing was hard for me. There were just like never enough pillows to support all the different positions. I never felt comfortable. It was always just getting them in the crib, getting them out. Like Stacy mentioned the tub. Like I also was a big baby wearer. I wore my son probably till he was like 2 or till I just couldn't anymore. We also went from the front carrier to the backpack carrier, which I highly recommend when they get a little bit bigger. My advice to you is like just always be thinking about like balance and balancing your center of gravity and symmetry, and like trying to, if I had my kids on the back, I was like carrying a fanny pack in the front and hands-free balance. And so, yeah, I pretty much bounced back from the first pregnancy, was getting on my Peloton and was just doing my thing and everything was great. I started to see some abs again. I was like, yeah, we're good. 40-year-old pregnancy I could do this. So, and then I was like, you know what? We got to do another one. The clock is ticking. I was like, let's get on this. We got to use those frozen embryos. So we went right to number 2. I had my daughter at 41. It was like the exact opposite. I was so fine with the C-section that she ended up being. The surgery part was like, whatever. I was over that sort of trauma of being in surgery again. But my pregnancy was really the issue. Like Kathy, I had literally every placenta issue that you could possibly imagine. I was like a textbook case. They actually even took my placenta to like examine at the lab for like a study. I had the previa. I had a velamentous cord insertion, which is where the placenta, the umbilical cord doesn't attach to like the middle of the placenta. It attaches to the little veins at the side. So the whole time I was monitored very closely to make sure that my daughter was getting enough nutrients and was growing. So my fear was just always that I don't know, something was terrible was happening inside of me, which was an awful feeling during such a beautiful time in one's life. My daughter was also a preemie. We delivered just shy. I was like 33 weeks and a few days, so just shy of 34. Yeah, I mean, what's amazing about that is for all the fear that I had going into the pregnancy or into the childbirth and all the like sort of stress around it, my daughter's perfectly fine. She is amazing. My OBGYN said, you don't need 2 eyes to see. You don't need, 2 legs to walk. You don't need 2 arms to swim. You don't need 2 lungs to breathe. He's like, you don't need a whole placenta to feed a baby. So like, I was like, okay, we got this. The body is amazing and can do really amazing things. That's sort of should be the overarching theme for this. So I didn't bounce back though quite the way I had with number 2. I sort of shortly after coming home, I realized that I had this sort of asymmetry around my pelvis and my lower abdomen. Of course, it was like 2 C-sections and all of that. But I went back to my OBGYN and I was like, what is this like pouch, this like sort of lump that's like on my lower right side? I didn't have this before. Did you guys forget something in there? What is that? Um, and he was like, no, you have a hernia. That's definitely a hernia. And I was like, oh, what do I do for that? And so they sent me I went to a general surgeon, and then I saw two people in that practice. Both doctors were like, oh, definitely it's a hernia. And then I went and had an MRI, and they were like, actually, we can't see the hernia on the MRI, but we know clinically it's there because you have this pouch, this, lump there. Fast forward to me not wanting to do exploratory surgery for a hernia that I maybe have. We just kind of went the wait and see approach. And so the doctor's like, listen, if you have some signs and pain and things sort of flare up there, we'll go ahead and do the surgery. I did the whole wait and see, and then COVID hit. And so I forgot about the hernia and I was trapped at home with two kids. And then my husband decided to get a dog. So we had that too. And there was like no help. It was just like full on 24/7 caretaking. And it just depleted me. I was in probably the worst pain in my life. I hadn't been able to sort of get my strength back, as we've sort of all talked about. And let's see, in New York, we had lockdown in the beginning of March of 2020. And then by August of 2020, I like thought that my rods were broken. I was like, something is so terribly wrong. It was beginning to be hard to like even pick up my kids. I was just in pain. I went to see an orthopedic surgeon. He took x-rays. They were like, your rods are fine. Everything's fine. Your hardware is great. I was like, oh, well, then what is wrong with me? Like, and he's like, well, those two unfused vertebrae, the curve there has progressed. So, and I said to him, do you think that has anything to do with the asymmetry I'm seeing at my pelvis area, like after my C-sections? And he's like, oh yeah, that's because your pelvis is like up and pushed forward on your right side. And I'm like, wow, how come nobody else knew that, including my OBGYN and two other surgeons, which I think is one of the key learnings that I would, say that like your scoliosis and your fusion has to do with everything in your life. And nobody else really will advocate for that or except for you, because so often doctors just kind of push it aside. Like you're filling out your paperwork and you're like, oh yeah, I had surgery, I'm fused. And people are like, oh, great, you're cured, you're healed. Like that doesn't have to do with all these other things. But the reality is that it probably does on some level. And like that should be sort of just in the back of your head as you move through life and as you definitely move through pregnancy and, motherhood. The body does change. Hormones are wicked. And it all plays a role. And I think that having my kids later in life at 41, like I said, probably the hormones from IVF and the hormones just changing in my early 40s had a lot to do with my pelvis shift. Also, I think just being weaker in my core from my first C-section. So I no longer had like the strength there. I mean, I joke that you could probably stick a fork in my abdomen and I probably wouldn't feel it. Like those nerves are shot. It took a long time to build back my core, which was the advice that my orthopedic surgeon that I went to see at 41 later than that, but during COVID, he said, listen, if you want to avoid future surgery, my advice to you is find a great PT, build back your core, which is what I did. I literally called a woman who I'd been referred to through a friend. I left her a desperate message in the parking lot of the orthopedic surgeon's office, like, oh my God, I desperately need your help. I hear you're an expert in like core rehab and all of this. And thankfully she called me back. And again, it was COVID. So I guess she took pity on me and had me coming to her house. And we were doing sessions like on her back deck with like masks and, heating lamps and pillows and props. It was like my first, I was like, what is all this stuff? Like, well, I need bands and I need balls and like, what is going on? It was my first introduction to all of that. I had taken some yoga classes in years past and sort of had dipped my toe in all of that, but I was pretty much like, oh, all I need is like this Peloton for, my life. But what I really needed was to be able to use my deep core muscles, which I haven't had, clearly had not in a very long time, or maybe ever. I realized after childbirth that I really was so disconnected from my body. Like I didn't know how to breathe into one side and not the other, and to expand my rib cage. And I didn't know, like my friend Diana, who's now my really dear friend. She also is the owner of Threes Fizzy Yoga, which is a program that you can have online. She's the PT that I went to and started seeing. She's amazing because she combines physical therapy, yoga, nervous system regulation, and also strength training. Maybe a little Pilates thrown in there too. It's just kind of like all encompassing. So I was very lucky that I found someone like that who really understood the body. And she was the first person who really introduced me to the mind body connection. Um, and I mean, I really credit having kids with that relationship and finding her, and then her being able to teach me and give me a toolbox to handle pain in a really different way. So I now will get a flare up, I'll now feel pain, and I know what I can sort of self-diagnose and triage and go to my bag of tricks and things that I learned with her that I still apply, even though we don't live near each other anymore, unfortunately. But the Threes Fizzy Yoga are still sort of like fundamentals for me. And I have since found other PTs that I work with, and gone deep into the scoliosis world, finding PTs that and Schroff, modified Schroff, and Scolio Pilates. All of that is part of my sort of world now. I don't know how I would exist without it, to be honest. Yeah, and so I mean it's pretty much the core of my story. I'm like trying to look at my notes, like, did I miss anything? But that's pretty much it. I will just sort of echo the fact that, I think some key takeaways are just being able to modify your life. Like when you have kids with a fusion, nothing is really that easy. Like travel it was like a slow form of torture, being on a plane and sitting for that long. I will just make the recommendation: FedEx your luggage. Like go with the bare minimum. You want as less is more. And and also just being aware that like scoliosis is hereditary. I keep a very close eye on my kids. Luckily, like we're not quite there yet, but I'm like a hawk, like asymmetries, what's going on, so it's important. And also like the prehab, first of all, no one gave me any physical therapy. I don't know if anybody else had it leaving the hospital. I didn't have any with my fusion. It's like crazy to me that I had an 11 level fusion at 13 and nobody gave me PT. It wasn't until after I had two children and like found it on my own because I was in such debilitating pain that I was able to actually sort of start this therapeutic process of healing. For a long time I was calling it like my wellness journey, but it's really my healing journey. Like I feel like I learned so much about my body through motherhood that I maybe wouldn't have realized until maybe years later. Because it just changed everything. But it's all, at the end of the day, it's all for the better, and I think that the future maybe looks brighter because of all the things I've learned. So that's my story, and yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Megan. Once again, another inspiring talk to hear everything you've gone through. And my favorite takeaway is to FedEx the luggage, although there's many good takeaways. That is such a good idea. But yeah, it's so interesting to have heard the three stories, and there's some parallels, but also there's quite distinct differences in when people feel discomfort and what they do to help themselves, and that this comes back to having awareness and noticing and then taking some action, of course. So thank you so much for sharing. And I'm going to take this opportunity to see if I can add everyone who spoke on the spotlight here. And yes, it is the round of applause online. We do it like this. And now there have been some questions that have come in. So thank you so much for those of you who are here and for the questions that you brought forth. Helena writes, a question for any of the speakers. Do your children have scoliosis, and was this on your mind during your pregnancy? She's also fused from T5 to L3, so yay. So does anyone want to speak to that question? I mean, you did address it briefly there, Megan, but
well, I mean, I can just build on that. That my son, who is 9, I've actually been following. He's been getting X-rays since he was 4 years old. So he is hypermobile, and has low tone. He's also very tall. So he's 9 years old and he's already 5'1". So we've tested for Ehlers-Danlos, and the consensus is that he probably has some connective tissue disorder, but really the prognosis or the therapy for any of it is similar. So we follow him. Right now it's fluctuated. So it's gone from being like a 12-degree curve to no curve at all to now like a slight 3 to 4 degree curve. Like, so it's very interesting. As they're little, it kind of can move, which I didn't know would happen, but it's been, so we follow him very closely. He gets an X-ray every year. My daughter, I actually don't see, knock on wood, any signs of it right now, but she's only 7.
I want to just throw in though too that incredibly there are families that have 3, 4, 5 people all with the condition, and others where there's nobody related to them. So just to say, that's one of those other variations.
I didn't consider it when I was thinking about getting pregnant, or when my body was telling me to get pregnant, because I never knew enough about scoliosis to know that it was hereditary at the time. So I never really considered it, but wasn't going to stop me from having children. And I think having children was certainly one of the best things I've ever done in my life. So
it was definitely on my mind. And I think, as we all know, we're all, well, okay, the topic's pregnancy. I was like, we're all women here. All right. But generally, when we come to these fusion support groups, it's almost like 95% women, right? So scoliosis affects men as well, but it doesn't tend to progress as it does for women. So you're not going to see nearly as many men needing to have surgery or having the steep curves. So when I found out that I was having a boy, I was so happy that I wasn't having a girl. And that's just how I honestly felt. And it was all because of the scoliosis, because, I know that it's there. And 2 years ago, so my son's in 7th grade, 2 years ago at the end of 5th grade, they have these really long end of year testing, and they have to be on the computer, so they're staring at like a fixed screen for hours. And he developed such bad neck pain from that. He couldn't move his head, and it was devastating. And I ended up bringing him to the doctor. The doctor was like, why don't you go to this chiropractor? And I'm like, to me, like, I don't even think about that because I don't go to a chiropractor. And I said, I'm going to go to scoliosis expert. So I went to an orthopedic spinal surgeon. I wanted them to tell me. And he was like, no, he was like, he's fine. He's like, there's a little bit of asymmetry. He's like, but kids this age, like it could come, it could go. But I am also like a hawk, and I'm a posture hawk with him. So I have yoga blocks around the whole entire house. If he's looking at a tablet or things, I'm like, lift your screen, like, to everybody. I'm like, don't look down at things. Just little things like that. Like, I'm just very aware of, because I know that helps me a lot with my neck pain. Last year, my son's like not big into sports, but last year I was thinking, I want him to be strong. I want him to support his body, because that's just going to help him if he is inclined to scoliosis. So I signed him up for teen CrossFit and he likes
Love it.
it. And so I'm like, whatever it is, because also you're developing your bone bank, your bone strength when you're young. And I was not athletic growing up. And so I just had a DEXA scan a couple months ago and I'm fine. But, it's also something that I think we should think about for our kids is like making sure that they have really strong bones by being athletic when they're young and not talking about bone health when women are in their menopause. And males need to think about it too.
Okay, and now Margaret asks, for someone wanting to get stronger, prepare physically in advance for pregnancy, and can only choose one modality due to time and financial restrictions, which one would be the best? And she's throwing out the ones that have been mentioned: scolio Pilates, scolio yoga, gym, other.
Just having done all of that stuff, I mean, it's there's so much available online now that like you don't really have to spend a ton of money. I will say that. Like you can really find a lot of great resources. Um, but I think if it was me going, like, I wish I had done sort of more prehab, if you will. I would probably go along the route of the Scolio Pilates and just like, some weight training.
Yeah, just like you talk about a home gym. And I'm always saying to everybody, have a space somewhere in your
Yeah.
house where you can have some, lay out your mat, lay out your equipment, whatever it is you're wanting to use, and just have it there so it's easily accessed at home. It's great to go to classes. Of course, it's great to meet people in person. And that's maybe where, Margaret, it's worth having an assessment with one scoliosis specialist in person once or twice, at least. Um, or maybe a couple of times through the pregnancy, go and get like kind of assessed for your alignment and all that with somebody who you can work with in person, but then learn some things for yourself and be able to do them at home. I mean, that's general for anybody with scoliosis and fusion, to get to check in real time, in real life with people, and also being safe, and also finding that right person, that ally you can talk to, I think also has come up here as an important story. Yeah.
My first thought was like whatever you enjoy. So, I mean, if
Yeah.
you're an outdoor person, going hiking on the weekend, that's great for you. If somebody else isn't into that, then, be in your heated, air conditioned house, and work out there. But one thing I just want to throw in is, I know that like strength is so important and we're talking about bone health and being stronger definitely helped with pain after having my son. But I also think that the yoga part is just really important for like the nervous system. And like you talked about, Megan, like getting that like mind body connection and just like tapping in and like noticing your stress, noticing when you have shallow breathing, because we are constantly thinking about our back, whether we think about it or not. Like you walk into a place and you're like, how's that chair or this or that or whatever. Like I think that we need to have something in our lives always for stress.
So true.
So true.
I think it's true. Everyone's individual, and I have found the Iyengar yoga with the alignment and the strength training, better late than never, but I'm still on my journey. I haven't figured out what's best, but I know what to do for me now. I'm still developing that for future.
Yeah, somatics too. It's a
Yeah.
very gentle approach. And I
Yeah.
would think that maybe the somatics work would be good later in a pregnancy when it's a little harder to move around
Oh
in
God.
bigger ways. But yeah, lots of good suggestions, lots of good options. But we have one more here. Hannah asks, if someone has to have the spinal fusion as an adult, how long would you recommend they wait post-surgery before deciding to get pregnant?
I I mean, I would, yeah. Go ahead, Stacey. You you jump in.
I mean, if you have to throw out a number, I would say
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
And some people like jump back to sports in 3 months, and I'm like, who the heck are you? Like I had my surgeon didn't even give me a full clearance to do whatever until almost like at least a year and a half after my fusion.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's when I started kind of dabbling and doing a little bit of yoga and just getting confidence in my body. So I feel like it's not 2 years to recover, but it's just 2 years to be used to your new body.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would just add to that and say, like, just really listening to your body. I mean, really, uh, you kind of end up knowing your own limitations. So if it's not feeling right yet, like that's an area to work on. And I would recommend to anybody just sort of feeling at your best, it's an ideal situation, right? To feel at your best when you get pregnant.
Yeah, good comments. Good comments. Yeah, listen to yourself. You're the only one who knows how you feel. You're the
Right.
only one who knows how your body feels. And like any intervention of any kind, we always wish for the best, but there can always be surprises with any surgery, with any pregnancy, as we learned. So, best laid plans, make your plans, but then be ready for anything. And I think that has been said in this meeting as well. So, you just start and you see where it goes and give yourself lots and lots of grace to change your mind around the direction you're going if you decide that that one's not working or that person's not working and you just try something else. So, anyway, wow, this was super great information all around. Thank you to Stacy, to Kathy, to Megan, and to everybody who was here to listen. It's just a wonderful, warm-hearted feeling that we can share this, and we're all part of this community, and it's so wonderful to share together. And please feel free to reach out anytime to the Twisted Outreach Project if you have further questions.
Thank you
Thanks
so
again,
much.
everybody.
Thank you guys. It was
Yeah.
great meeting you.
Okay.